See you next time.
Peace out.
All right, welcome back to Forgotten Fruits. We're here today going to do some pruning of the elderberry bushes. As you can see behind me, I've already begun the task here, but if you want to support our farm here, the easiest way is to subscribe to our channel, like us, give us some comments if you have any questions about this. Just interact with our social media accounts. It'd be helpful to us, see what we're doing. If you're interested in creating a food forest or propagating or any things related, just check out our links below. But today we're going to be focusing on propagating and pruning elderberry bushes. It is mid-February here in Michigan, so it is the perfect time to be doing this. We want to do it while the plants are dormant, and we have some warm weather coming up, so I figured I better get out here today before the plants start to come out of dormancy. We have a strange atypical warming coming for the next couple of weeks, so I want to get this done real quick. So today for the job, I brought out these loppers here to handle the bigger trunks here, and then I have my brand new fancy pruning shears made by Felco that I got for Christmas. These things are really nice, actually. I'm loving them. Very sharp, replaceable parts. I'm not sponsored by them, they're just really nice. So I just have some small handheld ones and these loppers. If you have really big tree stalks you're trying to cut down, you may need a handsaw or something like that. I know in some of the elderberry farms, down in Missouri and other places, they'll use a weed whip with a special attachment to it, saw blade attachment to it, and cut them off down low. But because we're in a northern climate, we don't have as long of a growing season, so I don't do that. I cut mine. This year I'm experimenting with doing it about 3-4 feet high to keep it so that the new shoots are above the deer brows. So you can see this is just a small grove we have on the farm here. We're gonna go through all this, trim them back to about this height, and then we have a couple other areas on the farm that we're gonna go trim up as well. Our annual trimming of the elderberries, and it's kind of a dual purpose task because we're trimming them down. You can see how tall they were. They're probably 10 feet high or maybe slightly more. So it's really difficult to harvest from them when they're that tall. Last year we didn't trim them down low enough, so they grew a little bit too high and it was difficult to harvest. So this winter I'm cutting them back a little further. But you can see the pile over here of cuttings I've already taken. These will all be used. This is everything I trimmed off so far, and they'll be used for cuttings, and we'll use these cuttings to help propagate these wild native elderberries, Sambucus canadensis. So I'll make a pile like this, and then when I'm done, we'll come through with the smaller clippers and trim the ends of all these off. Some of them will be dead. You can see if you look inside, there's no green ring on the inside of those. These ones are just totally dead. But I'll find a good example here. Cut this one. I think, nope, that one's dead too. All right, let's come way down here. You're all dead. All right, here's the live one. I'm certain of it. Okay, and this one you can see the green ring, the cambium layer on the outside there. That tells us that this is an alive cutting. So what I'll do when I'm done collecting my pile here is I'll probably take these up into my garage where it's a little bit warmer. But I'll go up there, take these small trimmers, fancy new trimmers I got for Christmas, cut the ends off, because in the ends there's a bug called the elderberry tip borer that can live there. So I cut these off just to be safe, so I don't propagate that tip borer. So we're getting rid of them. Cut all these off, and then once all the tips are removed, then all of these will be viable cuttings for propagation. So for each, you'll see in one of our previous videos that we talked about how to propagate elderberries, and we made little miniature greenhouses to do that. And this is how I got the cuttings for some of them. You can see there are nodes here. We call these the nodes where the leaves will come out. Up here is one node, and down here is another node. So at a minimum, you need 2 nodes to propagate a cutting. So what I would typically do is cut down here um, just below this node. And then when I plant this cutting, I would stick this in the soil so that that node is well beneath the soil, probably about halfway in. And then it'll start growing roots from this node, but it'll also start growing roots from these little tiny bumps here called lenticels. So all those will start forming roots, and then this node up here will form leaves, and it'll take off and it'll grow very quickly. But right now we're in Michigan, and it is mid-February, so there's no time to be planting. As you can see, all the snow around me. So we're going to take all these cuttings while the plant is still dormant right now, and then wrap them up in plastic, keep the moisture inside of them so they don't dry out, because if they dry out, they'll die and they won't be viable for propagating. We'll wrap them in plastic, put them in the refrigerator so they stay a constant temperature of, you know, around 40, or somewhere between 32 and 40 is ideal, I think. And then once the time comes here in Michigan where the ground starts thawing and it's a reasonable temperature, probably sometime around April, May-ish, depending upon the weather, I'll take these out and stick them in the ground. Sometimes I'll put them in pots if I'm not ready to plant them out yet and let them grow for a while in the pots and get started, and then I'll transplant them. But this year I was wise enough to have prepared the soil in my berry patch in advance. So I have landscaping fabric down in the rows, and we'll just go in there with a little razor blade and make a X in the fabric, a small X, you know, maybe 6 inches by 6 inches. And then I'll stick this in there, and then that one's done. Just pack the soil around it to make sure there's no air pockets around it. And then we'll put wood chips around it to keep the moisture content in, and we're done. When I'm taking these cuttings, what I do is I make one end angled and one end flat so I know which end is up. It's very important that you plant it in the same way it was growing. So I know that this was the top of the plant and this was the bottom. So for me, what I do is I make an angle on the bottom just so it's easier to push into the soil. Some people do it the opposite way because they say if you cut an angle on the top, it helps shed the water so that you don't get rot on the end. Um, I don't know that it even makes a bit of difference other than just so you know how to identify which is up and which is down. For me, I do it this way so I can push it in the soil easier. So I'll just take that. That will turn into a whole elderberry bush. By the end of this fall, this thing will probably be a pretty decent size. Might even put on a few berries. But by next year, it'll definitely have, you know, a moderate amount of berries. And by the second and third year, usually the third year, it's at full production. And after year 3, you can start taking cuttings off what were these cuttings. So it's a pretty quick turnaround time for elderberries compared to other fruit and nut, you know, producing bushes or trees. They're very vigorously growing. So that's one of the nice things about them. So that's really all there is to it. Here's some small ones. I don't waste them. I'll take that. It's got 2 nodes on it. That'll be a good cutting. And so on. We'll just sit here cutting away for hours till we get them all chopped up. You know, if you get one that only has 1 node on it, I'll just cut it off above that node so that that node will stay on this bottom stem. Just make it kind of a funny shaped one, but it'll be fine. It'll work out well. So there we go. And then each one of these, if they're the funny looking ones or they're not very vigorous, I'll just keep those for myself. But the nice ones I'll put in pots and put them up for sale on Facebook Marketplace or elsewhere for local people to help propagate these. These ones here are wild elderberries. We have some named cultivars that we will be taking cuttings of probably next year. But for now, we're just propagating these wild ones. And we like to have a mix of the wild and the named cultivars so that we get a greater diversity of the beneficial compounds in the elderberry, the polyphenols and other beneficial micronutrients. Because research has shown, I think it's from University of Missouri, research has shown that the profile across different cultivars of elderberry varies quite widely. So in terms of the concentration of the different types of beneficial compounds. So by having a diverse blend of them, we're going to try to get the best of both worlds, where we try to maximize the concentrations of all of the different beneficial compounds instead of just putting all of our eggs in one genetic basket, so to speak. All right, so one thing I've been kind of experimenting with is how far down to cut them off to trim them here in where I'm at in Zone 6B in Michigan. I know in a lot of the more southern states like Missouri and other places, the elderberry farms cut them to the ground, but because we are in a more northern climate, we don't have as long of a growing season. So this year I'm cutting down to this height, as you can see. This way it's not quite above the deer browse line, but it'll quickly get above that. We have a lot of white-tailed deer here in our area, and they're very overpopulated. And this particular area, this particular part of our berry patch is not fenced in. So these are not protected. So I'm going to trim them up a little bit higher than many people would, especially in more warmer climates. But that is the reason. It's because I want to keep, because A, they won't grow quite as tall here in Michigan in the course of one growing season, and B, we have a heavy deer pressure here. So I got to keep it so that when the new shoots come up, they're nice and tasty and tender, and the deer will eat them to some degree. I mean, they don't love elderberry, but they will browse on it a little bit if they're desperate. So I don't want them to decimate my crop for the year. So I'm going to keep it up a little bit higher than most people would. Earlier today, we did some pruning of our elderberry bushes and took a bunch of cuttings. And as you can see here in front of me, we have some lying here. I'm getting ready to package them up, because as soon as you take the cuttings, you should get them into shape in terms of the length that you want. You want at least 2 nodes on each one, and they should be roughly this length. You can see the ones here are not the prettiest. We're keeping these ones for ourselves, but all the pretty ones are already packaged up. But we want to quickly as possible get them wrapped up into plastic so that they retain all of the moisture content and don't die. As long as they stay moist and stay in a cool area that's like a refrigerator temperature, they'll stay good for months. So I'll be wrapping these up in this plastic wrap here, putting them in my refrigerator, and then keeping them until April or May. It's currently mid-February, so I'll be keeping them for a few months, give or take, in the refrigerator, and then pulling them out and putting them directly into soil when I'm ready for that. So because these are just for us here on the farm, I'm not even going to count them, honestly. I'm taking all these less than attractive cuttings that we have and putting a reasonable amount in here, as many as I can fit in one package reasonably. I'll wrap it here. This cellophane. Get a couple of good wraps on it, because these sticks it's pretty thin plastic, and these sticks tend to poke through a little bit on the little nodes. So get a few wraps on it, and then I'll get a wrap on the end, get a wrap on this end, and we'll call it a day. I'll just cut it off, and that's all there is to it. Now we'll throw them in the fridge. All right, thanks for joining us today when we pruned up these elderberries and taking some cuttings. You can see it's pretty well mowed down. A few more left to do in this patch, but just about done. So I'm going to take a break and see you next time.
Peace out.